On tonight's edition of the Overtime, it's all over for Flag High's volleyball season. We'll have a recap. Plus, NAU women's volleyball heads towards the playoffs. And NAU football hits the road after their first home loss of the season. All that and more on this edition of the Overtime. Thank you for joining us and welcome to this edition of The Overtime, Northern Arizona's only sports show. I'm your host, Kristen Chancellor, and I am joined by sports reporter Cameron Richardson, aka The Rich Report. Cameron, thank you for joining me. Let's talk some sports, shall we?
Let's do it, Kristen.
Getting into it, the Flag High Eagles volleyball season came to a close this past weekend, ending their season with an overall record of 29-11. Flagstaff High played a total of 40 games and worked hard throughout the entire season. Cameron, what's your take on the season and what players helped them out the most?
Kristen, there's no way around it. The Eagles had another successful season under head coach Beth Hagelin. Too bad it all came to an end with a 3-set loss to Estrella Foothills last Saturday. Flagstaff had to adapt this season without their star middle blocker, Tara Brain. Even though this is one of the Eagles' weaker seasons compared to recent years, they still have a lot to look forward to with sophomore outside hitter Gracelyn Nez. Nez had 435 kills this season at a 42% kill percentage. While Flagstaff will lose 7 players to graduation, they will have 10 players return, including 4 sophomores.
Well, Cameron, one thing that stood out to me this season was Coconino snapping the Eagles' 7-match win streak against the Panthers. Although the Eagles' season wasn't what they hoped for, they do have great potential, like you said, Cam, with players such as Nez returning. Moving on to NAU volleyball, the Lumberjacks are on a winning streak and are working their way through the last few games of the season before heading to playoffs. Cameron, what can we expect to see during these last remaining games?
Well, Kristen, unlike your beloved Denver Broncos, NAU volleyball has had a successful season, and they clinch a spot into the Big Sky Conference Tournament with a 3-set sweep over Portland State. NAU currently sits third in the conference standings behind Weber State and Northern Colorado, but endurance has not been their strong suit this season as they are 1-6 in 5-set matches, and they will head to the state of Montana for the final road trip of the year. That's where they went 5 sets with both Montana and Montana State in their previous meetings. NAU will close out the regular season in the Roll Activity Center with matches against Eastern Washington and Idaho next week, so make sure to pack the roll and give our Lumberjacks momentum as they axe their way into the postseason.
Going into these final games, we will most definitely see some fire within the Lumberjacks, especially from star players senior Abby Aiken and freshman Taylor Jacobson, who have both put up over 200 kills this season. Looking at the rest of the season, we have a total of 3 games left for the Lumberjacks, 2 of which will be home games against Eastern Washington and Idaho, and 1 away at Montana State this weekend. NAU football, the Lumberjacks travel to last place Southern Utah this weekend for their final road game of the season. Coming off their first home loss, the Lumberjacks are trying to win their last 2 games and end the season strong. Cameron, this team has had some solid players that have really moved the Lumberjacks forward. We're talking about Luis Aguilar, Brandon Porter, and Hendrix Johnson. Cameron, which players can we expect to see stand out in these last 2 games, and what does NAU have to do to bounce back?
This NAU offense has been nothing but entertaining to watch with this great receiving core that you just mentioned. Brandon Porter and Stacey Chukwumsey both have over 800 receiving yards this year. Porter has found his success through excellent route running, and Chukwumsey has been a deep ball threat throughout the year for quarterback Case Cookus, who leads the FCS in passing yards. Unfortunately for the Lumberjacks, their defense has been porous to say the least. Let me rattle off some stats here. Out of 124 FCS teams, NAU is 104th. That's right, 104th in rushing yards allowed per game. The Jacks ranked 118th in passing yards allowed per game and a dismal 121st in points allowed per game, which is good enough for 4th worst defense in the entire FCS. Now, there is good news as NAU plays the Cincinnati Bengals of the Big Sky, otherwise known as Southern Utah, this Saturday. They'll close out the season at home against Idaho, which, like NAU, sits at 4-6 on the season. If NAU can't keep points off the board, it is going to be a long final stretch of the season.
NAU football has fought hard this season to put up points up. especially with injuries on the team. However, these final 2 games should be interesting to see what the Lumberjacks still have in store. Cameron, we have an eventful weekend for NAU basketball. The NAU women's basketball team opens the season tomorrow against Seattle University, and the men's team is playing their home opener against Sagu American Indian College. NAU should be able to come out on top in both of those games, so let's hope they deliver. Speaking of basketball, Cameron, the Phoenix Suns came up for training in October at the Roll Activity Center. With the NBA season now underway, how are they doing?
Well, Kristen, the Phoenix Suns are off to an unexpectedly hot start through 10 games this season. They are currently 6-4 and inside the top 8 of the Western Conference. Some of their marquee wins so far include the LA Clippers, Philadelphia 76ers, and Miami Heat. Devin Booker is putting all-star type numbers as usual, averaging 25.3 points per game at a 54% shooting percentage. With the absence of DeAndre Ayton, big man Aaron Baines has stepped up his game, averaging 16.2 points per game. Kelly Oubre Jr. and Ricky Rubio have proven themselves to be solid additions, as both are averaging double-digit points, with Rubio being top 5 in assists and top 15 in steals. The Suns' next few games come at home against the Atlanta Hawks and Eastern Conference leaders Boston Celtics before heading on the road to take on the Sacramento Kings. Let's see if they can continue this great start to the season.